Okay, so we got Patrick Henningsen with us as usual on Friday. Thanks for joining us, Patrick. Well, you've been following with me the situation around the MH17 flight, and of course we haven't made too much comment on this on the UK Column News, but you've clearly been doing quite a lot more research than we've had time to do. So, so maybe you could give us a few clues as to what's going on, because as far as I understand, the truth is somewhat different to the official narrative.
Yes, thanks for having me, Mike. Yeah, for the last 5 days, we've been researching MH17 and gathering data, various types of data, which is publicly available. This is satellite imagery, air traffic control data, and also media reports from the ground in both the west and the east of the Ukraine. And what we've put together is in stark contrast with what you're seeing in the US and the British and European media regarding MH17. And as we know, from the moment of the crash, immediately blame was assigned to the pro-Russian separatists, rebels in the People's Republic of Lugansk and Donetsk. So that's the narrative that's been steamrolling since July 17th, last week, just under a week ago. And that's more or less continued unabated until Monday. And on Monday, and this is quite interesting, this has been blacked out by the US media. The international media organization that's running point on this particular story is probably CNN on an international level. So CNN is more or less the keeper of the narrative.
Yeah, and they were actually on site pretty quickly after the event, weren't they?
Yes, they were indeed. So we have I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover here, but I'm going to give you a short synopsis. Let's start with what was released by the Russians. And this is, bear in mind, the Russians have handed this over. This is all verifiable, time-stamped, with contextual data regarding all satellite imagery taken by Moscow during these events, and also the air traffic controller information which they've collected from their radar systems. They've handed it over to European authorities.
I thought it was interesting that they've actually handed the black boxes over to the British, and do you see any significance in that?
Well, the rebels handed the black boxes over to OECD authorities, who then have transferred them to Farnborough in Britain for analysis. Now, what those black box recordings come up with is anyone's guess. Obviously, we're hoping that Britain's predetermined stance on blaming Russia alongside the United States and all NATO allied countries isn't going to cast any prejudice on how and what type of information they release from this. Certainly, as it's happening in Britain, the BBC will be given first access to this information. And how the BBC reports it will be very telling when that happens. But within that information should have, if it's made fully transparent and all the information is released unedited, you'll find quite possibly the answers from the cockpit crew of MH17, what exactly happened on that day. And we were told, obviously, the US and NATO and our media in the West the first thing they put out was a 5-second YouTube clip of what appears to be a book missile launcher in a rebel-held area, leaving the area at the day of the crash. Well, that video has been discredited. That was released by the Ukrainian government, by the way, in Kiev. It's been discredited. Not only is it in the wrong place, but it also allegedly looks like it was uploaded on the 16th of July before the crash. So that's video of probably a Ukrainian missile launcher in a Ukrainian-held area, okay, mind you, that they're trying to put forth as the first piece of evidence. So you can cross that out. That's pretty much discredited, although Washington is still holding on to what it calls social media evidence. The second is an audio recording, allegedly, of rebel commanders boasting that they've shot down a passenger airline. And this is audio tape 1. And there's a second one released as well, audio tape 2, of 2 different rebel commanders in a conversation. And what's interesting here, which has been ignored by U.S. intelligence officials, probably intentionally, is that this YouTube video of the book launcher and audio 1 and audio 2, these so-called damning tapes, all contradict each other as to the location of this alleged missile launching battery. So they have different towns in the recordings. Not only that, the timestamps on these audio recordings looks like it's been edited together, including some timestamps from the audio raw data that would put at least part of this recording on before the actual crash was created. So clearly what's happened here is they pulled down audio snippets and edited them together. There's no way to authenticate these unless, Washington claims on Tuesday that they've authenticated social media audio, but unless they authenticate it as a fake, I can't see how that's possible. But what's happened is Washington's gone into reverse now. They're now backpedaling on their original story, and because of what Russia has released on Monday. Here's what Russia released on Monday. We have 3 book missile launcher batteries by the Ukrainian army that are in close vicinity of the crash site, which were moved into position between the 16th and the 17th, and then moved away on the between the 17th and the 18th. So there's no evidence that the rebels had a book missile launcher, or B, had it in the area, or C, launched a missile at this plane. But we have photographic evidence that the Ukrainian army, in fact, had multiple missile systems. And this includes the launch system, the loading system, and also the radio location system. So these are 3 units per book missile system. So this isn't something that you can just throw on the back of a truck. These are very sophisticated units. Manpower for each unit will be 4 to 5 trained individuals. So the Ukrainian army had at least 15 book missile specialists manning these systems on the day of the crash, and then moved them away on the 18th. So that's the satellite imagery. And that has also been provided to European officials, and it's been completely blacked out by the Western media. Second thing, radar information from air traffic control radar indicates that a Su-25 Ukrainian jet appeared on the radar just behind flight MH17, 3 kilometers behind it, minutes before the crash. So what happened with MH17? MH17 took a drastic left turn and deviated its course northeast for 14 kilometers before trying to correct its course, and then disappeared from radar. When it disappeared, that is probably when the plane began to crash towards the ground, where it eventually landed in Grabovo, which is a small village there, which is only part of the crash site. The total radius of the crash site is about 20 kilometers in diameter.
So that implies a breakup in midair then?
That does, and here's where it gets interesting. So Ukrainian officials immediately after the crash said they had no military aircraft available in the region. So that's been proven as a lie. Okay, so clearly there's a cover-up going on here. So you have fake evidence released via social media. That can only mean there's an intention to deceive. It's not even good evidence. And you have a denial that they had military aircraft in the vicinity of MH17. Okay, so already Washington's backpedaling massively from their initial position. Now U.S. intelligence officials are trying to say that, yes, it looks like, this is what Washington says, it looks like a Ukrainian military defector was running a missile system and shot down the plane, and was wearing a Ukrainian uniform
So sorry, just let me clarify that. They're trying to allege that a Ukrainian military official defected to the rebel side, and he took with him some surface-to-air missiles and fired one at the aircraft. Is that what they're suggesting?
Yes, that's how they're backpedaling right now.
Right.
So basically, we have a story which has just been released. I've been working with a team of people who are translating both Ukrainian and Russian reports, and I have one from a Russian Air Force colonel, and this is probably a way that maybe the Russians can leak information without having to take a side per se on this. But this is a retired colonel. Now, he's basically said here that the Ukrainian Su-25 jet fired and took out what it looks like the right Boeing 777 engine of MH17. It was a Rolls-Royce engine. And at that point, the plane was wounded and took an evasive maneuver 180 degrees northeast for 14 kilometers. And because it looks like, and if you look at what's happening on the ground, this is very important. If you look at what's happening on the battlefield, the Ukrainian military has been trying to split the resistance between Donetsk and Lugansk with no success until July 17th. And it looks like this plane was meant to crash in a Ukrainian military-held area, but the pilot missed the plane and hit the engine. And so this deviated the course and actually brought the plane down. It looks like a SAM missile system finished it off after it was hit. So the initial explosion heard by residents on the ground would have been from an Su-25 air-to-air missile, which they are equipped with, by the way, despite denials from Washington that Su-25s can't carry air-to-air missiles. That's not correct. We have photographs of those airplanes with those air ordnance on the wings. So that was then diverted, and then the plane was finished off by a SAM missile battery. It looks like we don't know for sure what the second explosion was, but we are guessing that it was finished off. This is according to this retired Air Force colonel.
Right, but from what you're suggesting then, if that scenario is correct, the intention was to have the plane come down in Ukrainian government territory, at which point they could completely control the narrative.
You're absolutely correct. So basically, MH17 was basically hit right over the front line. Okay, and this is when it was passing. I have pardon me for my pronunciation, Chenovnoye, and that means that that was a lot sooner than what has been published and asserted. So the timing and location of the attempted downing also jibes with the idea that the Ukrainians would have wanted this crash site to be under Ukrainian army control. And this is in the area much closer to the border between Russia and the Ukraine. And this would have secured the crash site, allowing, this is the key, Mike, allowing for a strategic encirclement regarding the what was going on in the south, and allowing the military to put on all-out offensive. An all-out offensive was launched on the 18th, okay, and this has split Donetsk and Lugansk.
So suddenly they've managed their strategic objective.
Yes, they have. So this crash allowed for public sympathy for the Ukrainian government, which was really faltering before this event, and also the military opportunity to go in and split the resistance significantly, which has happened. This is a major game changer. And experts have confirmed, and many analysts believe, that this military offensive would have taken weeks to prepare for. This isn't something that you could just turn the key and go with 12 hours notice, which is what we are seeing here, which is what happened.
Yeah.
So it's a major game changer in terms of what happened on the ground. So that's just another aspect of this.
So, Pat, do you think, really we were looking at this was intended to be an Operation Northwood style false flag operation in order to achieve a military objective? It's gone wrong. Really, not only the fact that the Russians are aware of the fact that it's gone wrong, but the use of social media actually has completely changed the direction of so they're unable to use their planned narrative, and they're really floundering around trying to find some kind of way out of this mess at this point.
Sure. The reality is this, Mike. The United States and NATO, they have all the evidence, okay? They're in possession of all the evidence, and they cannot release anything because basically Russia beat them to the punch on Monday, July 21st. And Russia did it in a public fashion, and they also handed over their findings to European authorities. So this basically means Washington can't release any of the information they have. And here it just so happens that a major U.S. military NATO drill was conducted in the Black Sea, which ended coincidentally on July 17th. This was Operation Seabreeze 2014. This was a massive exercise with many U.S. military specialists, which was doing exercises in electronic warfare and monitoring all civilian passenger travel in the region. And part of this was a U.S. spy satellite was positioned over this area, and on the 17th was coincidentally over the area of Donetsk and eastern Ukraine for approximately 1 to 2 hours, and over the crash site for between 5:06 and 5:21 p.m. The plane left radar at 5:21 p.m. So,
do you believe in coincidences, Patrick?
No, I don't. And also, why would the Ukrainian military have so many SAM missile batteries in the interior of the country around Donetsk on that day when it's known that the Eastern Ukrainian rebels have no real air force? They have no aircraft, really. So it's not up on the Russian border. It wouldn't be to guard against Russian aircraft encroaching on Ukrainian airspace. No, this is in the center where the conflict zone is. Why would they need surface-to-air missiles on that day in that region? That is another coincidence. So it seems to me, Mike, all the evidence is really pointing at a botched operation by Kiev, with the intention to blame the rebels and also indirectly to blame Russia. And you see this reflected in the coordinated media campaign, which has basically gone full steam really since the get-go, and which is now backtracking. And what it's done is it's designed to demonize Russia in the international community and in the theater, and to assign blame when blame wasn't there. So,
the other question then that comes to mind is actually, is Kiev capable of doing this? I mean, is this something that Kiev has the brains to do for themselves, or have they had instructions from elsewhere, do you think?
Well, one thing I can say is that the SBU, this is the Kiev Security Services, they are under the supervision of the CIA, who are housed in the same building and occupy the entire top floor of the security building in Kiev. So it only goes to reason, Mike, that this operation would have been overseen by the CIA. If the CIA wasn't overseeing it, I would be very surprised, considering that they've already set up a huge station, one of the largest CIA stations in the world right now, active CIA stations in the world, which is in the same building as the Ukrainian security services. So, in respect to all this, we can also connect a previous false flag event, which happened at the end of February with the so-called sniper attacks on the protesters in the Maidan, where hundreds of people, including police, protecting the government buildings, and the flash mob, which was backed by the U.S. State Department, people were killed by unknown snipers, which we learned later were most likely snipers who were firing from the Maidan mob-controlled building there in Maidan Square, and also we have ballistic reports which were ignored by the media, which were first revealed in the leaked phone call between the Estonian foreign minister and Catherine Ashton, who is one of the top people in the EU at the time. So we have a pattern of false flags and deception from the beginning with this situation in the Ukraine, and all throughout Russia has been blamed for the destabilization. And what you also have that's being completely concealed in the narrative is that the Ukrainian military are using their air force against civilian targets. Yeah. So this would be a war crime from the West point of view if it happened allegedly in Libya or in Syria. But it's happening in the east of the Ukraine, and it's actually happening in a more genuine fashion. And no word about this huge humanitarian and international breach of the Geneva Conventions. So again, this is about controlling the narrative. It's about framing it a certain way and blaming Russia all along the way, ignoring that this is an actual independence movement within the country of the Ukraine. And the ignorance of this is shocking, but not so shocking if you look at, for instance, the coverage in media and the political rhetoric regarding the siege in Gaza right now, and also the foreign fighters in Syria, which were all along being backed by Washington, Saudi Arabia, and the NATO allies. So I can't explain anymore that we're seeing a level of deception here, and our media is complicit in it, our politicians are complicit in it, and it's hugely damaging, and it's costing innocent lives on the ground.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, brilliant. Thank you very much, Patrick. I mean, we're going to go into this in more detail in the coming days and weeks. I know you have a major article coming out probably over the weekend. So, you know, have you any final closing remarks?
No. We have a very detailed report, which will probably be a definitive report in terms of this subject matter, and more comprehensive than anything anybody's ever seen. But we want to make sure that it's absolutely accurate, and that everything stacks up in the timeline, etc. So, but certainly, I don't know what to say, Mike. This, you know, an incredibly dangerous situation and an incredibly haphazardly organized event, which took place last week, according to the evidence, Mike. So I'm only I'm not speculating. I'm literally following the forensic evidence surrounding what happened on July 17th.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Patrick, and we'll speak to you again in the not too distant future. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike.